Well, greetings, friends. I am Ashara Ekundayo. I am an independent curator, cultural strategist, and the host of BLATANT, which is an ongoing forum and live zine series on art, joy, and rage that centers the lived experiences and radical imagination of Black women artists and cultural laborers creating across discipline and geography. Co-presented by Artists as First Responder and the Museum of the African Diaspora over the course of almost 2 years now, these informal, uncensored, and layered conversations celebrate the lives of artists whose creative practices heal communities and save lives. There are some rituals that we have established as part of this convening, which include an acknowledgement of the land, where we are hosting these conversations, and a knowing of the knowing requires that we question our relationship to the past, to the present, and the future of these sites in which we gather and live and create. Today, I am in my second home space, greeting you from the unceded land of the Muwekma Ohlone people in a place now called Oakland, California. These lands were traditionally the birthright of Indigenous people who were forcibly removed and have faced centuries of struggle for survival and identity in the wake of dispossession and displacement. And I walk upon this land, this stolen land, with humility and in solidarity with the Ohlone people and all oppressed peoples who came before now. That knowing that they are still here, they are still honoring and loving this land, and we are still here loving and honoring the people. And I honor my African ancestors and give gratitude for their guidance and their protection in this life and in this work. Also, before we step into this magical cauldron of magic that I think will be gifted by our guest today, I want to invite you to take a deep breath in, so to feel into your body and to just take a breath in together and release it slowly, in honor of the many souls who have become ancestors over the last weeks, the last months, and that we sit honestly with all of our feelings, those feelings of loss, grief, joy, disappointment, rage, and bliss. Today, I am honored to be joined by two sister artists, Jojo Abbott and Vanessa German. Welcome to the BLATANT Forum, sisters. How y'all be and where y'all be? What up, though, as my Detroit family says.
Thank you for having me, beautiful. It is such a joy to be here in this very unknown space of discovery and communion. I am in Los Angeles on Tongva land. I think as an African, I'm humbled to be here. My DNA has traveled far, and I am really privileged and blessed to be able to be on this land and thrive. And so I honor the ancestors of this land. I honor the living elders, the young ones, those yet to be born. And my greatest dream is that the meeting of our bloodlines can be healing to us all. And I hope that I am able to, in my work and in my existence, continue to honor Earth and their love for Earth and for one another, and that sense of community. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Greetings all. I am Vanessa German, and I'm coming to you from unceded Cherokee land in North Carolina. And this is land that was cruelly, violently, forcibly taken from the human beings whose love and joy and lives are a part of the entire earth and water here and still here. So in loving honor to that tradition of luminous earthlings, I am creating art in this place right now. And it's good to be here with you all.
Yes, indeed. Ashe, and thank you to all of our relations. I guess it's appropriate for me to just start with some very abbreviated bios for each of you and invite the audience to refer to the Museum of the African Diaspora's website to read a little bit more and to follow you all on your websites. Vanessa German is a self-taught citizen artist working across sculpture, performance, communal arts, immersive installation, and photography in order to repair and reshape disrupted systems, spaces, and connections. The artist Vanessa German's practice proposes new models for social healing, utilizing creativity, uninhabiting technologies of loving and tenderness as vital forces to reckon with the historical and ongoing catastrophes of structural racism, white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, resource extraction, and misogynoir. Wow, how can I not say that word today? It won't come. Misogynoir. Thank you. Jojo Abbott is a nomadic interdisciplinary artist exploring evolving themes of spirituality, identity, and community with self as the starting point to collective evolution. Jojo Abbott has offered interdisciplinary works in collaboration with the MOMA, Brooklyn Museum, the Ghana Pavilion at the Venice Biennale, the Frieze Art Fair with the Theaster Gates, and Prada, to name a very few. Jojo Abbott continues to develop and present her disciplinary practice through Power to the God Within and other curatorial projects. So thank you both and welcome to this forum for a moment. I've been wanting to speak with both of you regarding your interactive, site-specific, love-fueled work. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on performance and performativity as spiritual practice and as protest and as resistance. And so there's not one particular question other than tell me about the influence of spirituality and or religion in the design and the programming of your social practice work.
Is this how we're starting?
It is right now.
Yeah.
It is right now.
Could I enter into some of that through images, through sharing some of the images of my work?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Would you like to start with that?
Yeah, I would like to talk about spirituality and the practice and healing while sharing the work that is the thing itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. So this is some images to hold in your heart and to hold in the eye of your heart as we speak about spirituality and healing and love and soul and consciousness. I am Vanessa, she, her, and this is a work that is really important to me because this is the work that taught me and showed me and guided me into living in the soul of my life. This is a sculpture that I made called Power Figure to Keep Me Alive. And I came to a point in my life where I was struggling so greatly to stay alive in the rigors of the world with the ingredients that the world was telling me to be alive in, that I had decided to end my life and gave myself a 6-month window of time to do an experiment on my body and my soul on this land to see if I could keep myself alive by doing what felt right to me. So talking about spirituality and practice and healing is something that I cannot ever separate from the wholeness of my whole life. What I realize now is that from the time I was born as an earthling, I have been being separated from the truest, wholest technology of my humanness, which is accessing through my physical body, my consciousness, and accessing and using the technology of my soul and using the technologies of my heart and love to navigate this life. And this is the sculpture that taught me that. Every day for 6 months, I let myself do whatever felt right to me, which, if you think as a human being, sounds is an oversimplification, or that it's indulgent to do what feels right. Think about the things that the world gives you to make a life, and how those things actually really feel to you. Like, what does it really feel like to work 60 hours a week overtime? What does it really feel like to be in debt? What does it really feel like? So every day for 6 months, I did what felt right. And so I would walk out in my neighborhood and I would pick up a lot of the objects that you see in this sculpture. I would pick up bottle caps. I would pick up anything that illuminated itself to me, which is something that I hadn't given myself permission to do before, for a lot of reasons, because I would be like, what am I going to do with that? I would be like, people in my neighborhood are going to see me and make fun of me for picking up stuff out of their trash on trash night. But what I released all sense of shame and any obligation to anything other than listening to the truest voice inside of myself, which is a process of retraining the voice, retraining my ear to hear the voice of my heart and the voice of my soul. So what being an artist is to me is actually about how I am alive as a whole human being. So my practice is a spiritual practice, but the word spiritual practice does not do justice to the living reality of what it is to access my soul and love and tenderness intentionally as an actual technology and material in the work that I'm making. So this object, Power Figure to Keep Me Alive, literally showed me, it literally, one, kept my hands from harming my own body, because I would work meticulously, like one bead at a time. But also what happened when I went into the process, I became the thing itself. I wasn't an artist making art. I wasn't an artist thinking about social practice. I wasn't an artist making an object. I was in the wholeness, fully baptized in the system, the living systems of being and becoming my own whole self. And so that is the central engine. You can take this image off the screen, but this really helps me to talk about that place of intention and spirit. And as a human being that describes themselves as a citizen artist, really that is the work of art that showed me that the work always has something to do. I am asking the work to do something and using that place of purpose and power magically past any plane of impossibility. So it is the work of being whole. And sometimes in that process, there come songs, there come objects, there come photography, there comes these other things, but it's really the great divine work of being whole. Thank you for that time and space to answer that question that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the spaciousness of the answer, because it allows us to just open to what all the definitions of wholeness can be for each person, for each being in relationship to the other beings on this planet at this time. Jojo Abbott, you and I came to know each other at the Black Artist Retreats, and then have had time to talk about your work and how I experience your reflection as spiritual practice, as religious practice even. And can you share some of your thoughts around how spirituality or religion, or both, are infused through your work, or impact your work, or guide your work?
Well, I was born into a Christian home, very, very Christian. I won't go into the details of what kind of Christian, but very strict. And I experienced, my family would always say obedience is better than sacrifice. And this was meant to sort of warn you against having to be accountable for any error as a human being, and this idea that your best option was to obey. And yet I kept hearing whispers of God as an essence of love. And, there was this thing around performance earlier. I saw the performance of, I guess, religious leadership, but never quite experienced spiritual activation as practice, right? And so I kind of got really curious about the nature of God and how God was experienced as a living, breathing force, and how I could access this energy autonomously and directly, and make that sacred for myself. And so that curiosity led me up and down and into a path of just questions, honest, deep, light, cheesy, intense questions around what it meant to be in this body, to be here in this time, why this specific alchemy had come to be. And I think that personal curiosity about my personal purpose as a human being led to creation in a certain form that's ever expansive. But I like to refer to this phrase, message over medium, which is at the core of my practice. It's more about the message than the medium. And I feel spirit moving through me as a living, breathing, actionable force is far more exciting to me. It's become very exciting to me, particularly as an alchemist. It allows me to feel powerful and autonomous and still allow room for co-creation. It allows me to be accountable. It allows me to activate. And so spirit for me is action. Spirit for me is experience. Spirit for me is devotion. Spirit for me is commitment to something that ties the one to the all. And I'm forever in this quest of questioning this identity of this multifaceted God that we all call by so many different names or by no name at all.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Or by no name at all, or I call it myself.
Well, there you go.
I hear both of you speaking of freedom. I hear you speaking of the understanding of embodied practice, but embodied understanding of the divine. And, I had said earlier in the questioning around performance and performativity, not that I see them as the same thing, but because I have experienced both of your work as performance as well, that there has been offering to watch, to witness, to engage through breath, through song, through movement. Can we talk a little bit about the part of your work that is not sitting on the floor for us to like walk around and look at, but the part of your work that is when your body is in motion and we may be watching from across the street or on a video or some kind of live stream of some sort, the part that is performance. How do you define that in your work?
I kind of feel like for me, performance is as the result of existence. Performance is in the fullness of existence. To know myself is to be able to play with the dynamics of self and the range of self, and to be thrilled by this process of discovery and how I'm reflected and how I'm inspired and how I'm embodied by all things around me. Oftentimes I see performance for me as the honey around the medicine, the honey that coats the medicine. Performance provides an access point. It provides, I guess, a clearer mirror. It allows others to be present in this energy. And so I really lean on that as a mode of communication, as a mode of connection, as a mode of amplification, to also activate collective practice, right? To be together in that way, in that unified space of love, of presence with one another. And I feel performance offers that unique opportunity to share a story, but also co-create a story, and to be in that play together. Even if I'm performing by myself for the purpose of sharing with others, just knowing that we're alive and we're free to inhabit ourselves, the fullness of ourselves. You know, sometimes for me, performance is also the opportunity to make a fool out of myself so others don't feel like they don't have room to be all that they want to be, the wild, the goofy, you know, and the free. You know, I think sometimes it takes one person to do something crazy in a room and suddenly no one sees themselves as crazy anymore. And so, you know, performance is that space of not being held back in any way. You can use that excuse that it's performance, I guess for me, to be whatever you want to be in that moment, to tell whatever story you want to tell in the moment.
I love being close to you, like physically close and close proximity to you, Jojo Abbott, when you're singing. I love it so much. It's like light, somebody pouring, like there's this video of me, you, and Jennifer Johns at TA downtown LA, and you start singing, and that sway that you said to play with spirit, and that you can feel spirit running and moving through your body. I can even feel that in my memory of being at that space and hearing you sing. It was like, or being in your song, being in the waterfall, in the light fall of your song. I can feel that. I can access that even now. And yeah, so for me, I grew up in LA and I grew up around a lot of industry people. So performance for me, you know, coming up was really connected to fame. It was really connected to visibility and access to material things, you know, because I grew up I went to school with, you know, so many famous children, you know, kids who are on, you know, you would just see them on TV every week. And so for me, performance growing up in LA was really, really was a part of some of my first experiences of shame, my first real experiences of like deep rejection and rejection as a human being like going to performing arts schools, going to Los Angeles Conservatory for Performing Arts, auditioning for things. As a very young person, being in competitive performative environments was not good for me. And I am still trying to recover from being in environments as a performer where you're competing with other performers, and that's how you look at them. You're looking at them as competition. So that is something that I'm healing from in this, you know, as a person who's been performing and auditioning for stuff since they were so young. Performance shifted for me. Performance shifted for me in my 6-month experiment to see if doing what felt right could save my life. Because when I did that, I would listen to the same things over and over again. And I had never given myself permission to listen to the same song over and over and over again, or the same speech or the same voice over and over again. So I would listen to Alice Walker read her own books. I would listen to Toni Morrison read her own books, because I would be down in my little moldy basement studio in Homewood, and I would listen to Dr. King. Somebody gave me a box set of Dr. King's speeches, and I would listen to these voices, and I started to ask myself, why does Toni Morrison sound like this? Why is it that Alice Walker sounds like this? Other people don't sound like this reading Alice Walker's work. Why? Dr. King is saying the same thing that Andrew Young said, is saying the same thing that all these other activists said, but why does he sound different? What's happening to his voice? And it was listening to Dr. King on repeat in the studio that told me that opened up this world for me. Had a dream, Dr. King came into my room. I was in a bubble floating in the cosmos in like this cosmic deep space dream, and Dr. King walked into my room in this sort of orb, And he sat on the bed and I could feel my bed sink down. And Dr. King looked at me and he said one sentence. And I woke up and I remember thinking, I get it. The reason why Dr. King sounds different is because he's not talking about love. He has allowed himself to become the thing itself. He has allowed his body to perfectly, wholly, fully channel the wholeness of what love is in this distinct moment for him. And when I realized that, I was like, that's why he sounds different, because he's not performing. He has allowed himself. He has allowed it to be whole and free and to occupy every cell of his body. That's why Toni Morrison sounded different. That's why Alice Walker sounded different. So performance changed for me when I discovered magic, when I discovered that you could insert specific ingredients into the performance intentionally. And so for a while, I wrote a poem called If My Hands Were Anything Other Than Hands, and I wrote it to cure my friend. I had a friend who was 23 years old, reach across her chest one Saturday, felt a lump in her breast and had a massive, she had a massive mastectomy, double mastectomy within 24 days. She found out she had this advanced breast cancer at a really young age. And I wrote a poem to cure her from cancer. And I never told anybody what the poem was really about, but I inserted into every single utterance, every single sound of it, I inserted that purpose into it. And for 5 years, I never told anybody what it was about. So performance shifted for me when I realized that it is that the action of performance for me is not necessarily about the relationship between audience and performer and that space of proximity and visibility. But what it became for me was a way that I could access, insert, and play with the magic and play with the medicine and be in communion instantly with my spirit, which is all spirit, which is the spirit of light, which is all of it, and to use that and to do and ask it to do something, to decide that it would do something. So performance really began for me as something that stung. It stung my body because I was in these really intense environments as a young person. But when I realized that you put things in it, that's when it shifted for me. And so there are times when I am performing, but really what's happening is something that is far beyond even the lay of the language. I started to insert other information into the feeling of the sound, recognizing that as human beings with this emotional body and all of this symphony, this sensorial system of feeling and touch and all of that is what I am in relationship with when there is an audience. It's all this language of this way of feeling and touch and sensing and being and using the performance to access a place of communion and consciousness, right? So while it looks like we're just at a mic reading a poem, what's really happening is anybody who is in any proximity to that performance is colluding on the purpose of the performance. Just by hearing it, by being close to it happening, you are in agreement and affirmation and elevation of the purpose that is hidden inside of what just looks like a performance at a mic or a ritual or something like that. So much more, I realized that we are able. So for me, performance becomes a way that I can access magic, move magic, be inside of the power of the thing. And the power of the thing for me, it is the loving. It is the loving itself. It is allowing my being to become the wholeness and the fullness of the love that I have access to in physical body and in consciousness. And it is such, and then anything can happen in that place. Anything is possible in that place. Yes. Okay, thanks. Sorry.
I'm not doing anything except lifting my hands in agreement, and
yeah, isn't that, do you feel that?
I do feel that, and just gratitude and bows for the rememory. So, you being saying, I feel that memory in my body, the whole sensory, the sensation of this body that's in charge, right? That
Yes.
allows us to like experience and to create. I have this
Yes.
body this time. And pleasure, you know, the
Yes.
sensory of pleasure. Let's
Yes.
talk a little bit about how pleasure is used, like, you know, in the work, in the magic, and, you know, the divine erotic as well that comes through in your work.
I'm accused of too much pleasure and too much divine eroticism.
Come on with it. What you got, Jojo Abbott?
I believe pleasure is healing. And pleasure does not require someone else. And that's the biggest pleasure that I've discovered, that God is pleasure, God is joy. God is a constant state of bliss, right? And bliss is in acceptance. Bliss is in gratitude. Bliss is in presence. Bliss is being in a state of not requiring perfection, right? Bliss is flow. And so, ooh, pleasure. Pleasure is in touching a leaf. Pleasure is in feeling my feet, you know, deep in the sand. Pleasure is taking a drink of water. Pleasure is absolute presence and gratitude for every moment. And to know that it's a limitless fucking well that I can drink of is hella freaking exciting to me. I just go wild off that shit. So for me, knowing that pleasure is not something I have to go and buy or ask permission for to have access to, but it's something that I can speak into my existence and practice and embody and actually induce and provoke in others just by having that energy and that code of pleasure is a great high. I'm like, yo, pleasure is like, it's something that can go around in a room without even speaking. You know, it's such a powerful energy. And, you know, whenever we feel pleasure, from the simplest to the so-called greatest, most complex things, we can actually attest to the transformation that happens in our spirit's core. We can attest to that greater sense of love and expansion. And we're able to attest to the fact that it's not about the material. Maybe the material led to the discovery that that love and that bliss was there all along to be accessed. But we realize that it's something that really trembles within us, that feels very visceral, that makes us alive, that charges us up. And there is no limit. There is no cap. It gives unto itself and it gives to everyone around it. And so loving our body, our physical and metaphysical body, the ever-evolving self in its physical and metaphysical form, the fact that we meet, collide, combust, alchemize with other energies and forces, that is beauty to me. That is a pleasure. The understanding that I am powerful also in giving into a moment to discover what the universe has for me is pleasure. You know, sometimes control is pleasure, right? But the diversity of my own definition of pleasure is pleasure in and of itself, right? It's this thing. I talk about this this theory. If someone already has it, tell them they owe me money. But it's called the unisection. And the idea that most things are just the thing tying into itself, right? And I feel pleasure is one of those things, that it's this long thread that ties into itself in so many complicated ways, but it remains pure in itself and we all have access to it. And I love that.
I mean, your curatorial process, Power to the God Within, is the true manifestation of this philosophy, you know, that you're spitting, you know. As we say, I'm picking up what you're putting down right here.
And that's what everyone can access any time of the day, right?
Yeah,
Power
anytime.
to the God within.
It was like, yes, this is what we mean by, you know, what are the blatant manifestations of love and joy and rage and sadness? What does it mean to be angry? I'm wondering how anger shows up, how rage shows up, and how it, you know, how it shows up is one piece of it, but really, what does it mean for us to like honor the rage and the anger and all of the feelings that are part of our being in this body as creative? Because artists often speak for us. They speak the anger for us. They speak the rage and they show us, you know, and speak into the silences that, you know, we push down and stuff in sometimes. Tell me about rage, Vanessa German. Tell me about stuffing things.
Rage. So I have I'm gonna start in a hard place with this, right? So I have witnessed several murders, and I've witnessed this really catastrophic aftermath of an expression of rage that became physically violent in a tsunami of feeling that just flooded somebody's nervous system, and they did something, they can't take it back. So, you know, one of the things that invited into my living practice, just like filtering through the day, having to walk past places where, you know, people I know were killed, and, you know, and being in relationship with the spaces where bodies dropped and the rage, the incident of rage ended in that. I began to integrate into my living realm everyday rage. I was like, I give myself full permission every day to, I have this practice now where I will allow myself to imagine acting out physically a certain act of rage. I don't stop myself, and I don't police this place in my imagination where it's like, you shouldn't be doing that. You want to be a good person. Don't imagine this thing. But I let myself do that. I actually only did it like once or twice. And it was very helpful to me to imagine doing something physical to someone who had harmed me. But because I've seen what happens, I watched this sort of rage build up. You know, I've seen this like in my neighborhood with men really watch rage build up in a way that I've seen men cry, and they don't realize that they're crying. And they're so outraged, and they're like, I got a gun, I'm coming for you. And water will be leaking from their eyes. And I'm like, yo, there's so much pain in this body. So what happens for me in the daily processing of rage is it very quickly enters, I very quickly allow it to enter into my heart. And when it gets into my heart, the eyes of my heart see the rage and say, this rage is centered in this bowl of pain, in this place of hurt. And so I'm on residency in Asheville. Somebody called the police on me yesterday because the dogs are barking. And I didn't realize that it was the actual police department that I had to deal with. I thought it was like animal control or something, but it was the stone cold police, yo. And I was like, this shit is wild. And it made me so mad. I wanted to like knock on everybody's door and just like have this outraged moment. But very quickly when I processed through that, it got to this place where I realized I was like, where will I be able to be safe on this land? It entered into this place of heartbreak and pain. And so because I allow myself immediately in the moment when I feel rage, when I feel the pulse of heat coming over my nervous system, I allow myself to see it, to feel it, to process it. And oftentimes the rage in my body ends up being cried out of my body. I will weep it away because it just opens up this space of pain. So I found rage and really allowing myself to experience and express and work through rage as a very healing place. I do not, because I recognize that rage, like if we continue to submerge rage, that it becomes a kind of despair that is shape-shifting. So we do not want to be shape-shifted by despair. So we can allow ourselves to express, experience, and do this as the rage comes up in these moments. And recognizing rage differently from anger, because anger is the emotional expression of injustice, right? And rage is this, like I'm experiencing rage in these sort of continued places, like where somebody has kept punching the same place of anger over and over and over again. And that's a rage place for me, which is often around love, justice, and the wholeness of other human beings. But what I do in my work, in every physical object that I made, I am including all of these invisible ingredients. So rage, if you read a material list for my work on the wall at a museum or something, you'll see wood, hair grease, you know, cloth, twine, love, rage. And oftentimes it'll say rage, 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 rage.
Yes, yes.
Joy, peace, rage, rage, rage. And so I'm including the invisible ingredients into the material list and the reckoning of the physical object so that we're not, so that folks don't pretend, you know, they're like, oh, Vanessa, you're so sweet and loving. I'm like, don't get it twisted. All of the things are available to be felt in this humanness. I feel all of the things and they are all here. I have just decided not to make harm upon another human being's body. I have made the conscious decision that I am not going to put energy into any accumulation of death. But the rage is here and it's a part of everything. So when you see this beautiful object, yes, rage is part of that ingredient. And it's something that, you know, I was at a funeral for a child last week and I was like, I don't know what we're gonna do in our community. I don't know, like I heard a woman trying to talk her son out of killing somebody who they thought killed this child. And she was trying so desperately, but I could tell that the man, like he wasn't present. Like he had lost part of his consciousness to the rage. And I was like, oh, yeah. We need to collectively do something about this. We need to collectively talk about losing your mind in rage, you know, and that was really something that I have been with since being at that funeral.
I'm feeling into how my body started to shift and tremble listening, you know, to this story of you being, the police being called, of your reaction, of how you...
It was very painful. Yeah. I won't lie, it was very painful. It was very painful when I realized that it was the actual police department and not like a special animal services or something. And I was like, oh shit. I was like, so nobody could knock on my door, nobody could put a note in the mailbox. And like the privilege of peace that people live in around here is really duplicitous, and I have to, and I'm still in this space, right? So that rage feeling became a lot of tears yesterday, but I still am contending with my Black, fat, queer body walking in and out of the front door of this house, surrounded by human beings who don't talk to me, but somebody felt okay to call the police because their relationship with the police is communal.
Yes.
And so it's something that's ongoing. Like I swear to you, Ashara, I was like, I'm gonna get yard signs printed and they're gonna say to whoever called the police about the dog, here are some options for you. One, you know, in the future, you could consider, and just like leaving the yard signs up, like political yard signs, because where I am, to be honest, in Asheville, they do public service announcements on public radio that say, hey, you know, a lot of people are moving to Asheville. Here's a way to be a good neighbor. Go next door, meet your neighbor, introduce yourself. And if you have any issues, before you call the police, there are public service announcements. Before you call the police, consider these 3 options. And this the first time, because, you know, Asheville is a community that voted to give its Black citizens reparations, right? So there are all these murals here that say, cut the check now, reparations now. And so I don't know who called the police on me, but I was like, they must not, you know, subscribe to their public radio station.
They must not. They
didn't know they had options. And then I'm wearing this shirt today that says "Death to White Supremacy."
Okay.
Ashara, I was at lunch today and I heard a girl say, look at that lady's t-shirt. It was this group of young white presenting people, you know, and this girl goes, she was like, that's so rude.
Oh, is it?
How is it rude?
Like,
White supremacy.
No, her wearing the t-shirt is rude. That's what they talking about.
You're rude.
It was like,
I was like, wow.
The nerve.
But it's like, how do you contend constantly with those little bubbles of rage that pop up when white supremacist delusion just be cackling and dancing and like doing all this stuff around you, and you like it's really one of the things that hit me yesterday is it's really exhausting. I didn't realize how much I was holding in until I started to cry after like all of this stuff with the police. And I was like, this is like, where is there a state? I think about Thich Nhat Hanh saying, you become the peace. And I was like, yeah, but dude, mostly you was speaking at meditation centers and at the top of a mountain, and your daily interactions in a world of human beings who, a lot of them who are really functioning in this delusion were limited. So I'm like, in the steady world, in the sidewalk world, like what is a place of peace that I have such, and that I'm so surely inhabiting, that I'm no longer dodging the casual bullets of white supremacist delusion to my heart, into my spirit, into my soul. Like, what is the Black person's place on this land that is the end of the first Matrix, when Neo realized, oh, you don't have to fight it. I don't have to do this. I'll just bend out the way a little bit, And so I was like, I need another state of being, because I could feel how hard it was on my body. I could feel how hard my heart and my body were holding everything.
Yeah. That sounds incredibly intense. Thanks for sharing. Like when it comes to rage, I don't know if it's always about bending. And I mean, I love peace, and I very much embody that in my work. At times also, I believe that sometimes things need to be met with an equal or larger force. Like they literally need to combust and be disintegrated and alchemized into something else. And so that for me personally is an interesting space to navigate. Even the apartment that I'm in right now, I had a tall, big white man living under me. And when I first moved in, whenever he felt like I was making too much noise, he would bang on the ceiling, which was essentially my floor. To me, that was aggression, right? And I made an effort to go over, knock on the door after the third time or so and say, hey, I'm a human being living above you. If we want to really dissect this, I have the upper hand. I live literally above you. I could keep going, right? So let's communicate with one another. Let's show respect and consideration for one another as we're building community as neighbors. And then there was this one time I was deep in meditation, same aggression. But this time I wasn't fully just Jojo Abbott. There was some other level of peace that had been disturbed. And this is when I just lose it. Things just went crazy. I said, hee. I started, I don't even know where it came from. I felt like I was 300 feet tall. I stomped the ground and I told him, how dare you disrupt my peace? How dare you have the audacity? I picked up my mic and just words were just flowing through me. And after that, I felt like, okay, what would a white person do? Complain, write an email, call my landlord. So then I employed all those other avenues because I didn't want to feel small in my home. I didn't want to be fearful in my home. I didn't want to feel like I didn't belong in a home that I was paying for. And so that's an interesting space of negotiation I find all the time when you're choosing peace, where you're constantly being met by violence. And in the end, a month later, he moved because I had gone through all the channels of officially complaining. I was well within my rights, and he had no right to be doing that. And so I think, what is the balance, right? When there is a force of violence that induces rage, is it about being able to take the hit, or is it about finding a way to silence the noise, not to destroy another, but to find perhaps a healthier common ground? And I'm sure that varies, but it makes me curious,
Yeah.
Should you put up that sign outside? Should you wear your t-shirt? I say, hell fucking yeah.
here we are.
I don't think you having to feel it in your body and like suffocate is the answer either, you know?
No.
Suffer alone.
I didn't realize how much all of grace is a circular practice.
Indeed.
So I didn't realize until, in Pittsburgh, several white women had threatened to call the police on me because of my dogs at the park. And one woman, I sort of lost it with this woman at the park. I didn't threaten her. But I didn't realize that all of the grace that I had allowed before that moment wasn't circular. So I had, all these microaggressions that I had been enduring. I was like, they don't come home with me. I don't have to live with that person. I have to look at them, all these little things, but I hadn't fully run the grace in a circle through my body and my heart. So I had all this pent up half grace, which fueled rage. Like I had given all the rage out. So it was half grace. And it wasn't grace for me. And so I realized, my mother told me when I was a kid, she said, because growing up in Los Angeles, I think, I got into a fight on the street once. And she said, Vanessa, there might come a time in your life when you have to fight for your life and kill someone. And she said, so all these little fights that you're doing, they're messing with your instincts. She was like, you're really gonna need to know and be able to tell the difference when you need to fight for your life. So she was like, stop fighting like this, stop doing this little stuff so that you are able to tell and know truly when it's time for you to fight for your life. And I think about that. I think about, Jojo Abbott saying like, sometimes you have to meet the aggression in a way that is, thinking about how do you kill a lie? How do you actually stop the momentum of that aggression? And sometimes you're going to have to meet it with something and have the capacity to do that and to endure the aftermath of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway.
Understanding that force has been at play for a long time, right?
It is the movement. It's that I experience it as the same wave. It's an old wave and it is the same wave. Did you see the video of the shock wave after the eruption of Tonga? And there's this detail of the shock wave moving around the earth. I feel like there's this, the way that my people talk about it is that there is actually a distillation of fear on this planet and it just keeps moving around. It just keeps moving and moving around.
Yes. Can we look at some of the images? Some more images, Vanessa?
Yeah.
And continue into this conversation, whether it be the shockwaves of rage, but there's also a shockwave of love and, the communing and the collective act of our creativity as well. And, it's like, I've been wanting to like swirl with you because you've been swirling since we got on the screen together.
Yeah, did you resist it? Did you stop yourself, body from doing it?
I have, but now I think I'm here with you.
Yeah.
It was like, you're swirling, I'm swirling.
This image is so beautiful to me. This is the alleyway behind my house and my studio and the art house. And if you look at the street sign, it says Newman Way and Formosa Way. Formosa Way is an alleyway that runs the entire length of Homewood. Homewood is now the Blackest neighborhood in the city of Pittsburgh, which is a city made of 99 distinct neighborhoods. Formosa Way alleyway runs like this 1.5 mile length of the entire neighborhood. And they used to call it the killing fields because there were row houses that had their front doors facing the alleyway. And when those houses were abandoned, those row houses were abandoned and run down, people would use them for all sorts of things. And so that first image we saw, Power Figure to Keep Me Alive, not only did it keep me alive, it's still keeping me alive because I'm still inside of that rhythm. I'm still alive inside of that wave of understanding this place of the technologies that you're accessing to be creative and, and really thinking about it and living in the power of it. So I don't make single discrete objects anymore. I don't make single power figures. I make entire communities of figures. And this is from an installation called I Come to Do Violence to the Lie, thinking about Dr. King saying you could kill liars every day of the week, but how do you kill a lie? How do you suffocate a lie to death? And so each one of these objects are female energy source centered Black power figures, but each of the objects is a weapon against the lie. And every object on the power figure is part of the fuel source for the weapon. So an army, I made this army, it's 31 figures. It's like 50 feet when you get all of the figures together. But each of those objects is a weapon to kill the lie of separation. And so some of them, it is the weapon of open grief, like just letting the grief happen and be a part of everything. It is the weapon of rage and aggression together, and courage and aggression. So each of the objects is a weapon in and of itself. And by dint of sight, by looking at the work, hearing the work, because the work has a soundtrack. When I do installations, they're very theatrical, and there's always probably like a 16, 17 layer soundtrack that goes with it. But if people can't hear or see, when this work shows at a museum or something, there are these like tactile elements that we allow people to touch to, because any proximity to the work at all amplifies and moves the power of the objects forward. Yeah, you can show another image if you want, or you can ask questions. So this is I Come to Do a Violence to the Lie at the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum. And so you can sort of see that, it's on like a glittery ground. I wanted the figures to be standing on a field of gold. So we were able to create that a little bit. And there's a subwoofer in there that's hiding. So the soundtrack makes the room sort of shake a little. It's a very sort of visceral experience. You can show another image. Thank you. This is an installation I did called Sometimes We Cannot Be With Our Bodies. And as a citizen artist, I'm always asking myself, what can the work do? Like, I want the work to do something. The work is at work. The work is not just an object. Everything about it is the thing itself, from gathering the materials to producing the physical object to the objects being seen, being in the world, to what happens in the installation. It is all doing the work all the time. Sometimes We Cannot Be With Our Bodies is an installation that invites people. It's fully immersive. So there's a soundtrack that plays that is a radio show, a fictitious radio show called the Sometimes We Cannot Be With Our Bodies radio show. People would call into the radio show, and let's say their loved one was killed by the police, by the state, in the street, and the media was repeating one story. People would call into this radio show like, Trayvon Martin's mother, there's this recording of her saying how handsome her son was, and he loved to wear cologne, and he loved the ladies. And so you hear people talking about the loved ones that they lost, but it's mixed down with Chicago style house music. So you get in the space and it's bumping and people stand around and they dance. But as you listen to the soundtrack, you realize what you're listening to. So I'm thinking about Ntozake Shange saying we have to dance to keep from dying. So you're listening to sometimes things that are really heartbreaking, but you're listening to them at a pace and rhythm that raises your heart rate. And so in that place of elevated rhythm and elevated heart rate and that movement and the dancing, where the work becomes an entire emancipatory experience, emancipating the heart, emancipating the mind, emancipating the soul. So you can show another image if you want to. You can ask a question. You can go to Jojo Abbott. This is an installation I made. I did a sculptural incarnation of what is called the most famous painting in America, which is Lutz's Washington Crossing the Delaware. But this is called LaQuisha Washington Crosses the Day Aware. And so there's all these strange cosmic bodied Black figures that become all of the figures from that famous Lutz's painting. You can go to the next image. And in the installation, it is filled with the same color blue that I use in the blue walk. And yeah, sometimes that installation, sorry, with the boat, LaQuisha Washington crosses the day aware. That installation is called Miracles and Glory Abound. And it, yeah, I do this ritual around the country. It's called the Blue Walk. This is the ritual happening in Omaha, Nebraska, which is the site of, quote unquote, the largest race riot in American history, which when you understand, that's a really inadequate way to talk about what happened in Omaha in 1905, I think it was, or I forget. So it was like the 100th something anniversary of that. But we walked the path that they took Willie Brown's body on. And I've done the Blue Walk, or we've done it around the country, different cities. And we're using, this is the Blue Walk happening in Homewood. And what happens is I'll come to, if I'm doing it in another city, I ask whatever institution is bringing us in to find people who would want to do this ritual. We show them images. I tell them it's a very intense public spectacle of grief, love, joy, rage, celebration, triumph in a circle. So I meet the people, I ship all of the blue stuff I made, like I hand painted that dress with all the butterflies on it. I dyed I make a lot of this stuff, and sometimes I have to make it in hotel rooms, but I bring all these garments with me and I meet the artists or just the people from the community who participate in the ritual once before we do it. And it is you can go to the next image. It is something that is very, very intense. This is the art house in Homewood. When I found the love of my life, which is being love in my life, I found the easiest way to share and make more love was to share what I love. So I love making art, and I bought this house in my neighborhood, and whenever the door is open, anybody could come in, and it's just filled with art supplies, and you could come in and make art. But really it was an opportunity for us to be together in love, to be together in tenderness, to be together in creativity with nobody winding you down. You didn't have to pay to get in. There's always food and music, and it's just a sweet house, a sweet place. The artist in residence caught it on fire last year, so we still have to repair the house. And this is just me in the neighborhood behind the house by the art house garden with some of the kids in the neighborhood. When I shoot a photo series called The Blacks, and I walk through the neighborhood as I'm shooting it, and like kids just join us, and it becomes this little parade of beauty where the spectacle of the beauty in and of itself is the loving, healing, magnifying force. Like it's magnetic. We have the most amazing time and talks, and it's just walking around the neighborhood in beautiful clothes, taking pictures. But of course, it's always so much more than that.
Of course. I mean, hence the differentiation between performance and performance art, or performativity and performance art, the making of the whole, as you offer it to us. Just in process, a process question in terms of how long does it take to make a figure? I mean, they're different sizes. How do you actually, what is the process of gathering the material? What kind of material?
Okay.
What are they stuffed with? How long does it take?
Okay, so one, we recognize that there's no distinct start or stop, that the process is always ongoing, because it is one, excavating. It is like looking at the world as like the sight upon the world is a material. So always finding objects, looking for things that feel right. And this is not an oversimplification. I invite everybody who's listening to this to begin to look at the world for distinctly what feels right, and asking yourself, where does this feel right? Really sort of switching that reality lens. So I do that all the time. So I'm always looking for things. So every work is connected to the work that came before it. In my studio right now, there are like 11 works in process. There's wet process, there's construction process. So I try to do things, I keep the processes together. So I do wet work at the same time. I do carpentry, I do building and engineering at the same time, but I'm surrounded by the archive, the excavated materials that I know that feel right to me, which means, so I recognize that my ancestors are my instincts. And so when instinctively I am drawn to some material, I will keep it around me in the studio. And I'm always in a process of listening. There's dimensional listening. I'm listening to purpose in the object. I'm listening to my physical body. I'm listening to the materials that are all around me. And I am talking to the object. So it is constant listening, because there are times, have you ever done the DSM? Like, been into, like, I got free therapy at this depression clinic, and they would take me through the questions to see how you're doing in your mental health work. And they would ask me, do you see things? And I told them the truth one day. I said, yes, I see things. And they're like, oh, whoa, you can't, we got to ask different questions now. You said you see things. And they said, well, what do you see? And do you think it's really real? And they take you on these sort of like mental illness-based questions. And I said, well, I oftentimes will see a sculpture that I'm supposed to make before it's physically here. I'll be crossing the street and I'll see the sculpture walk by me, or I'll see it in a, that happens very specifically at certain times. So magic is a part of the process, and being open, being available, and not, especially in a world that really sort of values, that has this hierarchy between conceptual art and fine craft and folk art. There's all these layers. I'm exceedingly open to that which is telling me needs to be a part of the piece. But I also feel like, as a human being in this physical human form, I was born with all of the sculptures I'm ever going to make already inside of me. And so that's part of the process also. It is a process of deep listening, and it's a process that requires me to be constantly courageous, because I have to reach past so many obstacles that come through just my mind in the daily tumult of emails and stuff. So I have to really pray a lot in the studio. It is constant prayer and constant accessing my people for help. I need a lot of help. Sometimes the help is getting over myself, anxiety. It is. And so, but whenever I ask for help, I always get it. So being like that prayerful, extra dimensional quality of being in relationship with the earth and with the spirit of creativity itself, which my people, recognize as one of the formative forces of the entire universe. So you are in relationship with the actual spirit of creativity, that wholeness. Like, can you imagine that? Like being in relationship with that which made tulips and poppies and aluminum and all of that. So
I can imagine that.
Yeah, lots of deep listening.
And do you have assistants?
Like a actual helper in the studio?
Yes, actual people who come and fold with you, collect things with you? No?
No, sometimes my friends, I'm very isolated. I have a very isolated practice. I'm also nomadic studioing around the country. So I'm in Asheville right now. I don't know a lot of people. Speaking of pleasure, I would like to know more people, but I'm very isolated in the studio. I have, there are times like I have to string so many beads. I have to do a lot of handwork. And so I hire somebody sometimes to do string beads with me, because it's just like, sort of you're just stringing one bead at a time. This is not a mechanized system. So we're stringing hundreds and hundreds of pounds of beads. And I hire somebody to do that with me every once in a while. But I don't have like a factory-based studio. It's very much me. And I spend most of my time in the studio or at home. I have to socialize like once a week or 1.5 times a week. Otherwise I get really weird, because I don't talk to a lot of people that are not on the other side of a cash register. So my process is very, it's a lot of me.
There's a question in the chat from Christine Mays, who is a
Hi, Christine.
beloved sister artist from San Francisco,
I'm
asking,
familiar with her.
says, Vanessa, my lovely friend, how can we support you as the art house is being rebuilt?
I would like you to place your hands on your heart and center the energy of your heart into into the momentum of the energies that are coming together to bring healing to the art house, because really that's what it's about now. Things, we had an engineer and a construction manager and COVID and construction times and all this stuff. So really right now it is amassing that wellspring of energies that are bringing about the healing of the physical building. And that's something that you can honestly contribute to through your heart. We recognize that this is the most powerful resource that we have right now of assistance in the world, is our heart space. So please do think of the art house as whole. Please see it whole in your eyes and in your mind's eye and in your heart. Please see it joyfully, filled with children who are laughing and a happy, healthy garden. See and feel those things. You allow yourself to feel what it would be like to be there, because that's what we need now. It is just bringing all the pieces together.
Thank you. Thank you for all of those, for all of that. Jojo Abbott, there are some images we would love to see from you, and however you would like to present them and talk about your work.
I think, we can just kind of go through them pretty quickly. My work is pretty vast, so there's a lot of imagery work, which a lot of body painting, a lot of creation and channeling of what many call avatars, but I believe to be beings that exist in multiple timelines. Sometimes I call them messengers, but just the embodiment of multiple selves. And so, yeah, we can just run through them. And I think there's some installation images, work I've done for magazines. That was for Flaunt, which embodies my constant obsession with the essence of the Trinity, and the alchemy that they create. That's from a new series I'm working on at the moment. So just exploring, that's actually within the last week and a half, I think. Getting back to photography has been quite interesting, especially self-portraiture, rather challenging. But that is part of a sculpture series, also a Trinity set, a small miniature clay piece that's sort of swimming in a world of imaginary creatures. So again, diving deeper into that mythical space that exists in multiple other planes. And that was actually shot for my garment work. So I make wearable talismanic wear that's charged and created with intentions and prayer. And so we wanted to create imagery that would tell that larger story, that would invite people into the energy that the garments were being made for, so that it wouldn't sort of come off as just another t-shirt, but more so something that you wore with intention, that allowed you to fully be present in your own fullness. But of course, you still get a lot of my avatar work and the embodiment of channeled beings. And that's along the same lines. I transfer a lot of my work in fine art to my fashion work. And so this is part of Spirit Gear, which is my line. And it references this continuous line, which represents the course of life, sort of having tosses and turns and winds and bends, but us sort of remaining grounded in that larger sense of love, that larger sense of community, that larger sense of self-discovery. And it allows for us to remain malleable and mutable and fluid in this life's journey. I feel like rigidity just creates so much dissonance and so much unnecessary pain. And so allowing for grace and that's embodied in the work, and of course, power to the God within. And on the left leg, it says of sacred blood, because I believe we are born of sacred blood. Yes, and that's a piece that I actually shared with Ashara that might be going into a show in November, but that's a recent piece that I'm still working on at the moment. So I wanted to kind of share works in progress. This textile. That's also a new piece. I'm playing around with new material. Well, not that new, but I guess it's new because it's within the last 6 months to a year. But playing around with the new material, going back to casting. And yeah, it's been really cool. So I've, in this process of working with clay, which I feel is truly intuitive, it feels like something that's deeply embedded in my DNA. It feels like I'm back home every time I touch clay. I've also been really difficult, I guess hard on myself when it comes to trusting that I have practical skills. So as much as I'm a creative in the ideation sense, I'm really obsessed with perfection, which is something that I'm constantly working away from, and working towards excellence, which I believe is more of a godly state. But, you know, along that obsession, I kind of really wanted to go and take a course and understand how to really work with this clay so that, you know, my body and my mind were working in harmony in terms of the practical skill aspect, and then my spirit could further enhance this experience. So that's from a class that I just took in the last 2 months, and that's the first of many much larger pieces that I'll be working on. And that's a work on paper with an artist frame that was in a recent show. That's basically a channeling of codes and thoughts and states of consciousness that have little codes embedded within it that you probably can't quite see. And it also, once again, sort of takes that language of the continuous line that's represented in the garment work and translates it here. We can go to the next one, I think. Oh, so that is a 16-foot pyramid. My attempt to reach God. No, just kidding. But that was a pyramid that came to me very clearly that needed to be made for a recent show. And it's all made out of woven plastic bags. And it speaks to the idea of climate change. Well, not the idea, the practicality and reality of climate change. And the urgency to be really present with that, to be accountable, to be responsible as a community in order to envision a future in which we can continue to thrive. And so in this pyramid, which also references architecture, which I believe is indigenous to African lands and multiple other spaces, celebrating the energy of a pyramid, which really represents a charging of energy moving in multiple directions. This little portal has 2 mirrors, so it offers an infinity perspective. And so you see yourself reflected over and over and over again, and it speaks to this theme of power to the God within, the idea that the God is within. And by accessing ourselves and our true selves, we're able to show up more fully in the world. We're able to show up more purposefully in the world. We're able to show up more powerfully in the world. I also have a dance with anxiety. And so in a lot of my exhibitions, I consider spaces of solitude even within shared space. So oftentimes you'll see a smaller space for incubation within a larger shared space, just having that room to be present with yourself at all times, which I believe is part of spiritual practice. We can never leave ourselves behind. And so leaving room for the self to constantly be present is key. On the wall on the left side is a, I believe, 9 by 6 foot painting. It's an oil painting that speaks to the Trinity. And I'll expand a bit on the Trinity. So when I was departing from my family's religious practice, I guess not so much departing, I would say re-alchemizing my family's religious practice, I really sat with the essence of God, the definition of God, the name of God. And I remember I was at New Inc. at the time, the New Museum's incubator program. And I was working with some mentors and they kept asking me, what's at the crux of your work? If I took your work and I ripped it into a million pieces, and picked up one tiny piece, could I still see you embedded in that? And so I started to think about the why, the everlasting why, the ever evolving why of my work. And so one morning at 5 a.m., I woke up and all I heard was Mausobolisa, which is the name we have for God in my tribe, my people, the Ewes. And in multiple narratives, Mau and Lisa are masculine, feminine. Sometimes they are one body, two heads. Other times they're twins. In some stories, there are two separate bodies that have no relation. And they come together at the beginning of time and they birth multiple children. Out of those children, there is one that embodies the fullness of mother and father, who is then elevated to the status of mother and father, forming Mausobolisa. Now, these stories vary, right? Because, of course, we share things through verbal and oratory methods. And so, you know, as I sat with this essence, it became the why. The anchoring of alchemy, the anchoring of co-creation, the anchoring of understanding that it's multiple parts, understanding collaboration, understanding distinct elements still being able to lock arms. And that for me was really exciting. The idea that God wasn't one track minded, but God actually consulted God. I found that really interesting, right? Like, oh God, you stop and ask God, what's up? So this Trinity and this force was really fascinating to me. There are other aspects as well as far as how to invoke these energies. But in a lot of my work, you see me resonating deeply with Sogbo, which is the child. And for me, Sogbo represents that balance between masculine and feminine energies, that balance between choosing aggression or, you know, I guess what would be perceived as aggression and violence when you are being met with violence, understanding that it has to be equal force or more, yet still being able to choose grace and peace at the same time. Sobo represents that gatekeeper. And actually when Vanessa, you shared a work earlier, your first image, it references how Sobo is oftentimes represented, also representing elements of, or reflecting elements of Legba, which is the gatekeeper, often at the crossroads. And so that energy of being crafty, that energy of, you know, being devoted to the message and not the medium, and saying whatever it takes to get us there is what I'm going to employ. That really excites me about Sogo, being able to take on different forms, different shapes, different energies, really being focused on the message and really being committed to making sure that that message is communicated to people in the way that they can best digest it, rather than being that overlord that says you either get it or you don't, you know. So was that crafty essence, and allows me to really play in this spiritual space of community building and self-exploration. I think that's the last one.
Thank you. Yes. I know we're going to be wrapping up the show soon, but I want to talk about this intersection, this trinity, the use of color, and clearly this place where your upbringing, you know, religious practice has entered into, not quite sure if, oh, there you are, has entered
Sorry
into,
about that.
It's okay. It'll work. You're still here. You're still here. And what is urgent right now? What feels poignant and urgent, you know, for you and your work right now, as well for you, Vanessa? What's urgent?
Sorry, I keep getting apologies. Call keeps coming in. What feels urgent for me right now is truth. Not truth as a static thing, but truth as a discovery, truth as humility, truth as practice, truth as learning, truth as embodiment, truth as presence. What's important for me now is us allowing room for our truths to bring us closer together rather than separate us. I'm curious about where there is room for all of us to fully just be, and for us to still be able to love each other while supporting each other's evolution and each other's growth. Color brings joy, color brings imagination, color brings memory, color brings about play. Color allows the child within to thrive, and I believe the child is the key to crafting this future that we all so desire. Not to lose that sense of wonder, not to lose that unbiased desire to love, not to lose that sense of innocence as much as the world and its experiences cause us to be jaded. To remember that inner openness, and to allow ourselves to play in solution finding, in manifestation, in engaging the magic of our own lives, allow ourselves to play, and see where love shows up for us. And, you know, I'm gonna rush just because we're running out of time and let Vanessa speak as well. But yeah, I think truth, us discovering it for ourselves and us allowing room for others to share their own.
Thank you.
What feels urgent? So honestly, I don't think anything is feeling urgent for me right now, except being. To be present in being feels the most pressing. If I'm moving an ingredient into a place of urgency, for me, I think I am experiencing a lot of stepping deeper into being in living relationship with my consciousness, and consciousness in the work, and purposed consciousness. But I'm, you know, the beingness is the most urgent, the most alive thing for me.
What are the, where can folks find you all? You know, we're gonna go just a few minutes over, y'all. So, but what's the next opportunity for us to see your work, exhibition, a performance, an opera? Where do I get to find you, Jojo Abbott? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Apologies. I'm on Instagram creating wild things all the time, expressing and at play and sharing pleasure and rage and joy pretty frequently. My website, jojoabbott.com, well, Instagram, Jojo Abbott. And of course, in person. If you're in LA, I'm performing on the 30th. I'm back to doing musical performances again. And have an opera coming up in New York City later this year. Our show in September in San Francisco, Ashara. I'm looking forward to that. And then working on a show with Vanessa for New York City this summer. So just a number of really exciting things happening. Summit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So West Coast, there is work. I have work in the next Bridge Project show that opens in a couple of weeks. I am being featured at Independent in New York. Independent opens the first week of May, and I'll be in performance at Independent. So I'll be physically at Independent, I think, after on the 6th, maybe the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. I'll be performing in London on May 2nd at I'll put it on my Instagram because I don't know how to pronounce the name of the university. I have my first big show with Casman in New York City that opens in September. And I have show at Mother Gallery. I have a lot of shows. So there's a lot of opportunity to see new work and to be, I do very intimate performances, sometimes just me and one other person sitting in the chair, and to have experiences like that around East Coast, West Coast, and in Europe right now.
Okay, thank you.
But you can find me on the Instagram and see for when I'm able to put, that information will be there.
I know there's a question in the chat that we didn't get to from Sydney Camp, and I will put it into your Instagram so that you can respond to them directly on that question. Just in terms of the Blatant Forum, a couple of announcements that we have in terms of the next Blatant zine. There's actually a printed accompaniment to these conversations that we've been hosting. Will be in the Museum of the African Diaspora's bookstore starting next week. Issue 2 will be there, so check that out. And I want to remind folks that they can always rewatch or watch all of the past episodes of the Blatant Forum on the museum's YouTube page. So if you go to YouTube and Museum of the African Diaspora, you'll see all of the amazing public programming that has been produced. And shout out to Dr. Elizabeth Gesso, who produces this show with us, with me, and for running tech today as well. Our final, and the next episode will be the final episode of Blatant, will be on Tuesday, June 21st. So stay tuned to the Museum of the African Diaspora's website and their newsletter to find out who our guests will be, and follow on Instagram as well. And then also an invitation to support and to donate to the museum. If you love this kind of programming, the opportunity to have these kinds of open conversations with Black artists of the African diaspora across gender, across the whole diagram that is the world, then text some support, 56512, and then just put in MOADSF and follow the link to make a donation, or like me, become a member and invite your friends to become members of Black museums that hold space for the Black imagination, the Black genius. And you're gonna see a survey that pops up in your email that just says, how did you like the show, or what did you like, or what was poignant for you at the time? So please follow all of that as we move along through the series. And then the last thing is to thank the partners. As I mentioned at the top of the show, Blatant as a forum is produced and co-presented by Artists as First Responder, which is a platform, a 6-point platform, as well as the museum, and is supported by AE Creative Consulting Partners, the African American Art and Culture Complex in San Francisco, the Akinadi Foundation in Oakland, the Women's Foundation of California, the Walter and Elise Haas Fund, Tau Rising, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. So with that, my last question is, tell me about the last time you witnessed blatant joy. I see. I
experience blatant joy a lot because I live with animals, and they're very pure communicators. And so that's always all around me. I have my friend and her daughter and I walked along the river and just sang songs from Cats. That was very joyful because we couldn't remember all the words, and it was beautiful to sing out loud on a walk. I experience a lot of joy. I really like to make things, and I'm always making things, and it's an exceedingly joyful place.
Mm-hmm. I experience a lot of joy. Sometimes, yeah, I wonder if there is ever a cap on joy.
When was the last one? Was it an hour?
Just now. I think, yeah, joy is like, it's not even it doesn't feel like a luxury anymore. It feels like a necessity. You know, it feels like something that I deserve, you know, on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. So joy has become something that's not complicated anymore. I experience joy in simply waking up and jumping out of bed. Yesterday I was at the beach. It was awesome. So much joy seeing the birds, having my feet in the sand. We ran up and down some sand dunes on the other side of the beach. I was out in Joshua Tree, sleeping under the moon, no tent, just laid out all night. This weekend, you know, just being charged. It's amazing things like that, you know. Gratitude brings joy, and just joy right now. Joy again, joy again, joy again. Looking at your beautiful faces, joy, you know. Yes.
Well, I have to say it's been my complete joy to spend this little bit of time with you all. Definitely healing for my heart, and hopefully healing for all of the folks who are joining us in the circle and who will watch this program at some point later on. And I bow to each of you. I bow to your spirits, your ancestors, and to your practice. So thank you. Thank you for joining us on the Blatant Forum today. And I hope to talk to you and see you all soon in the flesh, and kiss your faces.
Me too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Peace.